I walked into the operating prep room, and Dr. Vance, the attending I was reporting to, gave me a brief, dismissive glance. "You're the replacement?" he asked, his eyes lingering for a second on my generic issue scrubs, which probably looked like they came from a discount store compared to his tailored set. I saw a couple of the other surgeons nearby exchange amused looks. "I hope you can manage a basic appendectomy," one of them muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. "We're completely swamped tonight." I just nodded, tying my hair back into a tight bun. To them, I was just another temp, probably desperate for the shift. I could feel the familiar, quiet focus settling over me as I moved to the scrub sink. They saw a temporary surgeon looking for work. They couldn't know that this quiet was something I'd learned in field hospitals in Afghanistan, performing trauma surgeries while the sound of mortars echoed in the distance, saving lives when there was no specialist to call for backup, and no backup coming. "Let me guess," Dr. Vance continued, his tone weary and already annoyed. "Some community hospital experience?" I started the methodical process of scrubbing my hands, the same 7-minute ritual I'd done thousands of times when every single second was critical. "Something like that," I replied, keeping my voice low. The night was just getting started, but I had a feeling it was about to become very complicated for them, and whatever happened next would certainly change their evening. The trauma bay became a flurry of activity right around 11:47 p.m. The radio crackled to life with a paramedic's urgent voice. "We have a multi-vehicle collision coming in hot. 3 criticals, 2 separate ambulances, 4-minute ETA." I heard Dr. Vance swear under his breath. The department was already stretched thin, and this was the last thing they needed. "Get Ramirez in Trauma 2, he ordered the charge nurse, barking the command. "She can take the least critical of the bunch." I didn't wait to be told twice or to be dismissed again. I walked calmly into the assigned bay, my movements automatic as I began checking the equipment, making sure everything I might need was exactly where it should be. Through the large glass partition, I could see Dr. Vance and the other senior surgeons getting ready in the main bay, clearly preparing for what they believed would be the more difficult cases. The first ambulance arrived at the emergency entrance with a screech of tires. I heard the paramedic shouting his report as they wheeled the gurney through the doors. 23-year-old male, motorcycle versus semi. He has massive abdominal trauma, likely internal bleeding, and his vitals are dropping fast." They were heading him toward Trauma 1, where Dr. Vance was waiting, when the lead paramedic suddenly stopped and looked right at me, staring through the glass. "Wait a minute," he said, his voice trailing off as he squinted. "Is that—" No, it couldn't be. It didn't have time to register his confusion. My own patient was being wheeled in, a middle-aged woman from the same accident, presenting with multiple fractures. This was the kind of case that, in a normal hospital setting, would likely tie up an operating room for at least 2 or 3 hours. Her patient arrived conscious, but her condition was clearly worsening. "Compound fractures to the left femur and tibia," the paramedic reported. "We suspect internal injuries, and her blood pressure is falling." My hands began to move, assessing and acting with a practiced precision that seemed to make the assisting nurses pause and watch. I wasn't just following the standard procedure. I was moving with a level of efficiency they clearly weren't used to seeing, let alone from a temporary surgeon. "Prep operating room 3 immediately," I said, my voice quiet, but carrying an authority that cut through the noise and made people move without hesitation. "I also need a full trauma panel, cross-match 6 units of blood, and get orthopedics paged to be on standby." The charge nurse, a woman who looked like she'd seen it all, found herself moving to follow my instructions before she even seemed to process who I was. Once we were in OR 3, I felt completely in my element. My movements were fluid, with no wasted motion. Every incision was deliberate and perfect. What they had probably triaged as a 3-hour procedure, I was well on my way to completing in a fraction of that time. The anesthesiologist, Dr. Alastair Chen, who I learned had been in the field for 15 years, watched me with a look of disbelief. "Where did you train?" he asked quietly, as I finished a complex vascular repair that most general surgeons would have waited for a specialist to handle. "Here and there," I replied, my concentration unbroken as I began aligning the fractured bones with near mathematical precision. My technique was clean, but more importantly, it was fast, almost impossibly so for the level of accuracy I was maintaining. The OR door swished open, and Dr. Vance stepped in, probably to check on the simple case he'd given the temp. He likely expected to find me struggling or asking for help. Instead, he found me placing the final sutures on what I knew was a textbook-perfect repair. He instinctively checked his watch. 53 minutes from the moment I made the first cut. "This patient is ready for recovery," I announced, pulling off my gloves. "Prognosis is excellent. She should regain full mobility within 6 months. I walked right past him as he stood there, completely stunned, as if this were just another day. He followed me out into the hall, his mind visibly racing. "Ramirez," he started. "That was... How did you—" I was already looking at the chart for the next emergency, a cardiac case that had just been brought up. It was the kind of surgery that would typically go to the most senior surgeon on staff. "I can take this one too," I said simply, already, heading for OR2. "Unless you need me somewhere else, doctor?" I left him standing there and disappeared into the next operating room, knowing a growing suspicion was forming in his mind. This wasn't just skill. It was something else entirely. Something you don't learn in a quiet community hospital rotation or from desperate temp work. Meanwhile, I later learned that the paramedic who'd brought in the first patient was in the break room, talking to anyone who would listen. "I'm telling you, I know her from somewhere. That surgeon in trauma too. I've seen her work before, but it wasn't in any hospital." By 12:45 a.m., the rumors were apparently spreading fast. The temp in OR2, me, had just finished a complex cardiac repair in 38 minutes. It was a procedure that would normally take a full team of specialists close to 3 hours. I walked out of the operating room just as calmly as I'd gone in. My patient was stable, and the repair was flawless. Dr. Vance cornered me in the surgical prep area. "Ramirez, I need to know where you trained," he demanded. "That cardiac repair. I've only ever seen that specific technique used by military surgeons. Combat surgeons." I met his stare, keeping my expression neutral. "I've picked up a few things over the years," I said, already starting to scrub for the next case. A pediatric emergency had just come in. A 7-year-old boy with internal injuries from the same multi-vehicle accident. This was the kind of delicate surgery that made even the most experienced surgeons pause and approach with extreme caution. "This one needs to go to Dr. Croft," Vance said immediately. "Pediatric trauma requires—" I interrupted him, though I kept my voice quiet. "I've got it. Dr. Croft is still in surgery with the abdominal case from the first ambulance. This child can't wait." I was already moving toward OR1. My confidence was absolute. There was no room for doubt. The pediatric surgical team was assembled, but I could feel their anxiety as I walked into the room. Operating on children is always emotionally charged, and doing so with an unknown surgeon none of them knew only added to the tension. I sensed it immediately. "Talk to me about the patient's history," I said calmly, already reviewing the scans with an eye that I knew wouldn't miss a thing. 7 years old, about 50 pounds, probable splenic laceration, active internal bleeding. My voice had the steady, authoritative tone I'd used for years, and I saw the team visibly settle. What I did next was apparently something they would talk about in this hospital for years to come. My hands moved with a precision that I suppose might have looked almost supernatural to them. Every cut was perfect. Every suture was placed with mathematical accuracy. I repaired the child's injuries with a combination of speed and delicacy that I could tell left the entire surgical team momentarily speechless. "Vitals are stabilizing," the anesthesiologist reported, a note of pure wonder in his voice. "I've never seen anything like this." I worked in focused silence. My technique was a product of training that went far beyond civilian medicine. It was the muscle memory of someone who had performed these same actions under the worst conditions imaginable, when lives hung by threads and there was no room for error. 42 minutes later, I was closing. "The patient should make a full recovery," I announced. "I don't expect any complications." The pediatric nurses just looked at each other in amazement. They had just witnessed what might have been the most technically perfect surgery of their careers. In the hallway outside OR 1, Dr. Vance was on his phone, talking to the chief of staff. "I don't care what time it is, Evelyn. You need to get down here. We have a situation with the temp surgeon, and it's not what you think." I came out of the OR, already shifting my focus to what was next. "What else do we have?" I asked the charge nurse, as if completing 3 near-impossible surgeries in under 2 hours was completely routine for me. "Trauma 4 just called up a gallbladder case," the nurse replied, still staring at me as if I were some kind of apparition. "But it's complicated. The patient has severe adhesions from a previous surgery." "I'll take it," I said, without hesitation. "Prep or 3. Dr. Vance stepped in my path, blocking me. "Ramirez, I need answers. Who are you really?" But I was already walking away. My mind was on the next patient who needed my help. In the break room, the original paramedic was now holding court, talking excitedly to anyone who would listen. "I figured it out," he said. "I know where I've seen her. It was 3 years ago at Walter Reed Medical Center. She was working with the combat surgical team, the one that handles the worst of the worst from overseas. They had a name for her. The Ghost. Because she could save people everyone else had already given up on." If I heard any of the whispers that were starting to follow me through the hospital corridors, I gave no sign. I had work to do, and people's lives were depending on me keeping my focus exactly where it belonged. At 2:15 a.m., I emerged from OR 3 after finishing the complex gallbladder surgery. What should have been a 4-hour ordeal with the adhesions had taken me 55 minutes. The patient was already stable and showing excellent recovery signs. The surgical team was no longer just amazed. They were starting to wonder if they were witnessing medical history. Dr. Vance was waiting for me, and this time he had the chief of staff, Dr. Evelyn Reed, with him. She had come in despite the late hour, and both of them looked at me with an intensity that was hard to ignore, looking like they'd seen a ghost themselves. "Dr. Ramirez," Dr. Reed said, her voice formal. "We need to talk. 4 perfect surgeries in under 3 hours isn't just unusual, it's unprecedented. Our hospital insurance requires us to verify the credentials of all surgical staff, especially for temporary assignments." I paused, my hand already reaching for the OR schedule. A 5th case was being posted. An emergency appendectomy, but one with complications. It was the kind of routine surgery that normally wouldn't warrant this much attention, but everyone in the hospital now knew this night was far from routine. "My credentials are in order," I said quietly. "The patient in Trauma 5 needs immediate attention. We can discuss my paperwork after I'm finished." I started to move toward the prep area, driven by that same calm confidence that had marked my entire night. "Ramirez." Dr. Vance's voice was different now. The dismissive irritation from earlier was completely gone. replaced by something that sounded like awe. "The paramedic recognized you. Walter Reed, the combat surgical team. Is it true?" I stopped, my back still to them. For the first time all night, I allowed myself to hesitate. In the sudden silence of the hallway, the normal sounds of the hospital, the distant beeping of monitors, the squeak of shoes on tile, the controlled chaos of emergency medicine that never stops, seemed to rush in. "There are soldiers alive today because of the work I did in field hospitals," I said finally, my voice low. "When you're operating inside a tent, and you can hear mortars falling around you, you learn to work fast, and you learn to be perfect. There's no time for anything less." I turned to face them. For a brief moment, I let the quiet temp facade drop, letting them see the person who had operated under the worst pressure imaginable, who had saved lives when failure meant watching young soldiers die thousands of miles from home. "But that was then," I continued. "Tonight, I'm just a surgeon filling in where I'm needed. And right now, that patient in Trauma 5 needs me more than this conversation does." Dr. Reed exchanged a look with Dr. Vance. "The appendectomy can wait 5 more minutes. We need to understand. Why are you working temp assignments? With your kind of experience, you could have your pick of positions at any major medical center in the country." My expression must have softened slightly. "Some of us don't do this work for the prestige, Chief," I said. "We do it because people need help, and we know how to provide it. The soldier who taught me the most about this job used to say that medicine isn't about where you work. It's about what you do when someone's life is in your hands." Just then, the charge nurse appeared at the end of the hall. "Dr. Ramirez, the appendectomy patient is prepped and ready. His condition is deteriorating. We really need to move." Without saying another word, I headed for OR 2. As I walked away, Dr. Vance called out, "Ramirez, after tonight, you know we're going to want you to stay. Whatever brought you here, we need surgeons like you." I paused at the operating room door. "Let's see how the night ends first," I said. "This last case might be more complicated than it looks." I pushed through the door, leaving 2 of the hospital's most senior staff members standing in the hallway, trying to process everything they'd just witnessed. Through the OR window, I knew they were watching me begin my 5th surgery of the night. "Get me her complete file," I heard Dr. Reed say quietly to Vance, "and find out what really brought her here. People with her level of skill don't just show up as temps without a story behind it." I shut it all out, focusing entirely on the patient in front of me, working with the same combination of speed and perfection that had defined the entire night. Whatever my story was, it would have to wait. Right now, there was still work to do. At 3:38 a.m., I completed the 5th surgery of my shift. What had looked like a routine appendectomy had, as I suspected, revealed itself to be a complex case involving unusual anatomy and significant complications. It was the kind of surgery that could have easily gone wrong in less experienced hands. But just like the 4 operations that came before it, I handled it with the same flawless precision that had left the entire hospital staff talking. Dr. Vance was in the observation gallery, and I saw he had called in Dr. Croft, Dr. Sato, and 3 other senior surgeons to witness it. They were watching what I suppose was the most extraordinary surgical performance any of them had ever seen. 5 perfect operations, all completed in just under 3 hours and 40 minutes. Each one was handled with a level of skill that must have bordered on the impossible for them. "I've been practicing surgery for 23 years, I later heard Dr. Croft whisper to the group. "I have never seen anything like this, not even close." I emerged from OR2, stripping off my surgical gloves with the same calm efficiency I'd had all night. The entire group of senior staff was waiting for me in the hallway. But instead of feeling intimidated by the attention, I almost felt amused by it. All 5 patients are stable and are expected to make full recoveries, I reported to Dr. Vance. Is there anything else that needs immediate attention? Chief of Staff Reed stepped forward, her expression a mixture of admiration and total bewilderment. Dr. Ramirez, in 30 years of hospital administration, I have never witnessed a surgical performance like what happened here tonight. 5 complex operations, 0 complications, and completion times that shouldn't be medically possible. I need to ask you directly. Who are you really? I looked around at the faces surrounding me. Surgeons, nurses, administrators, all of them staring at me as if I'd just walked on water. I took a moment, weighing my words, deciding how much of my story they needed to hear. My name is Elena Ramirez, I said finally. I'm a trauma surgeon. I completed my residency at Johns Hopkins. Then I spent 4 years with the 86th Combat Support Hospital in Afghanistan. I've performed over 800 surgeries under combat conditions, including field amputations, emergency thoracotomies, and complex trauma repairs, often while under direct enemy fire. The hallway became completely silent. Even the ambient hospital sounds seemed to fade into the background as I continued. I received 3 commendations for surgical excellence and saved the lives of 137 soldiers who were classified as unsalvageable by field triage protocols. When I returned to civilian practice, I found that working in peaceful conditions felt— I paused, searching for the word. Easy. Dr. Vance found his voice first. Why are you working temp assignments? With your record, you could have your choice of positions anywhere in the world. My expression probably grew a little distant for a moment. Some of us don't adjust well to the politics of civilian medicine, I explained. The bureaucracy, the emphasis on profit margins over patient care, the way administrators often treat medicine like a business instead of a calling. I prefer to work where I can just focus on the surgery, without all the complications. But tonight, Dr. Reed said slowly, tonight you've shown all of us what medicine looks like when it's practiced at the highest possible level. Our patients deserve that kind of care. Our staff deserves to learn from someone with your abilities. I nodded, thinking it over. Your team did good work tonight, I conceded. They adapted quickly, they followed instructions without question, and they put patient care first. That's not something you find in every hospital. The group exchanged glances. I knew, and they knew, that this was a turning point, that what happened next would determine whether this extraordinary night became a one-time event or the start of something more. Dr. Ramirez, Dr. Vance said, his voice formal. I would like to offer you a permanent position as senior trauma surgeon, with full surgical privileges and complete autonomy in the operating room. Whatever brought you here tonight, I hope you'll consider staying. I looked around at the faces surrounding me again. These were medical professionals who had just witnessed something exceptional, and they seemed to want to be part of whatever came next. For the first time all night, I let myself smile, just slightly. Let me think about it, I said. But first, I believe someone mentioned coffee in the break room. It's been a long night, and the sun will be coming up soon. As the group started to disperse, I overheard Dr. Reed pull Dr. Vance aside. Do whatever it takes to keep her, she whispered. People like that don't come around often. Maybe not even once in a career. Dr. Vance nodded, watching me as I walked toward the break room. The question isn't whether we want to keep her, he replied. The question is whether we can create an environment that's worthy of someone who operates at her level. I was already thinking about the next shifts, cases, wondering if this hospital might, after all this time, be the place where a combat surgeon could finally find some peace without losing her purpose. As dawn started to break over the hospital, the news of the night's events had clearly spread through the entire medical center. I sat in the break room, finally sipping a cup of coffee, while I reviewed the post-operative notes on my 5 patients. Every surgery had been flawless, every patient was stable, and every procedure was completed in record time with 0 complications. Dr. Vance found me there, still in my scrubs, probably looking no more tired than when I'd first arrived 12 hours ago. "Your patients are all doing well," he reported. "The cardiac case is already awake and asking about going home. The child from the car accident is expected to make a complete recovery. Honestly, Elena, I've never seen results like this." I just nodded, unsurprised by the update. "Combat medicine teaches you to be efficient," I said simply. "When you're operating in a field hospital and the wounded just keep coming, you learn that perfection isn't optional. It's the minimum standard for keeping people alive." The break room door opened, and several of the night shift nurses came in, clearly hoping to talk to the surgeon who had become a legend in just a few hours. I greeted them with the same quiet professionalism I had shown all night, answering their questions about my techniques and sharing insights that most of them had never heard before. "Dr. Ramirez," one of the senior nurses said, "I've worked trauma for 15 years, and I learned more from watching you tonight than I have in most surgical conferences. Would you consider doing some teaching if you stay on staff?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it, and for the first time all night, my composed expression must have shown a flicker of something deeper. The message was from Dr. Marcus Cole at Walter Reed. "Heard through the grapevine you had quite a night. The 86th misses their best surgeon. Are you finally ready to come home?" Dr. Vance noticed the change in my demeanor. "Everything all right?" I set my coffee down and looked around the break room, at the nurses who had worked right alongside me, at the anesthesiologists who had trusted my judgment without question, at the surgical techs who had adapted to my pace. "I spent 4 years in Afghanistan," I said, my voice reflective. "I learned that medicine is about more than just individual achievement. It's about building teams that can save lives under any conditions." I stood up, my decision clearly made. "Dr. Vance, I'll accept your offer, but on 3 conditions. First, I want to establish a trauma training program here based on combat medical protocols. Second, I want to work directly with your emergency department to improve response times and surgical outcomes. And third, I want the authority to implement changes when I know they'll save lives, even if they challenge the hospital's traditional protocols." Dr. Vance didn't even hesitate. "Done. All 3 conditions accepted. When can you officially start?" "I never stopped," I replied, already looking at the morning's surgical schedule. "But I will need my gear shipped from storage, and will need to discuss bringing in some additional equipment that's standard in combat hospitals, but rare in civilian settings." Chief Reed appeared in the doorway. She had obviously been listening to the conversation. "Dr. Ramirez, welcome to the permanent staff. I think you'll find that this hospital is ready to operate at whatever level you're willing to take us to." As the day shift staff began to arrive, word continued to spread about the extraordinary night that had just concluded. I, the quiet temp, who had walked in completely unnoticed, was now the surgeon everyone wanted to work with, learn from, and follow into whatever challenges came next. "So," Dr. Vance asked as we walked toward the surgical suite, "what made you choose us? What made you decide to stay?" I paused by the window that overlooked the emergency department, watching the ambulances arrive with new patients, new challenges, and new lives to save. "In Afghanistan, we had a saying, Mission first, people always. This hospital, this team, you put the people first. That's rare in civilian medicine, and it's exactly what I've been looking for. I turned back to Dr. Vance with that same calm confidence that had marked my entire night. Besides, I added, I have a feeling the most interesting cases are still ahead of us. And after 12 hours of perfect surgery, I'm just getting warmed up. The hospital had found its newest senior surgeon, and I had finally found a place where my combat-trained perfection could serve a peaceful purpose. But as I prepared for whatever challenges the day shift would bring, everyone understood that last night had been just the beginning of something extraordinary.